Welcome to the True Crime Glance. Imagine this. A woman in a small Welsh town leaves a simple note on her shop door. It says, "Back in 2 minutes." And then, she's never seen again. Today, we're diving into the baffling 30-year-old disappearance of Trevalene Evans, a case that has it all. A mysterious man, alibis that just don't add up, and yeah, a really shocking discovery under the floorboards of a golf club. So this is where things get really wild. In 2019, two brothers were using one of those tiny little inspection cameras, and they thought they'd found something absolutely horrifying under a local golf club. They snapped this grainy photo, and they were completely convinced it showed the skeletal remains of Trevalene Evans. Okay, so how did they even end up snooping around a golf club? Well, to understand that, we have to rewind the clock way back. We're going back 3 decades to Saturday, June 16th, 1990, in the small town of Llangollen, North Wales. This was the day that 52-year-old Trevalene Evans just vanished into thin air.
And it all started with this, a simple, handwritten note taped to the door of her little antique shop. You know, the kind of everyday thing you or I might do. But this message became a chilling prophecy. Back in 2 minutes, except those 2 minutes turned into 2 hours. Then 2 days, and eventually, decades.
When you look at the scene she left behind, it just gets weirder. Inside the shop, police found everything. Her handbag, her keys, her jacket. Her car was just parked nearby. I mean, these are not the actions of someone who's planning to disappear, right? It really looked like she was planning to be right back. The only thing missing was Trevalene herself.
So pretty quickly, the investigation started to zero in on one very crucial figure. In the 2 days right before she disappeared, a whole bunch of people saw Trevalene with a mysterious, smartly dressed man.
And we're not talking about some shadowy figure in an alley. Their meetings were surprisingly public. He was described as being in a suit, carrying a briefcase, and they were seen all over this small town for 2 straight days, chatting near her shop, just walking down the street, even grabbing a drink together at a wine bar. And here's the crucial part. The very last sighting placed a man matching his description inside her shop on the exact morning she vanished.
So you're probably thinking, well, they put out a sketch, they must have found him, right? Nope. Despite a massive police investigation and his face being circulated everywhere, the man was never identified. He never, ever came forward to say who he was or what he was doing with Trevalene. And that silence makes his identity one of the biggest mysteries in this whole case.
With no solid answers, you get what you always get in these kinds of cases. Theories. A whole tangled web of them. Over the years, everyone from investigators to her own family has wrestled with some wildly different ideas about what could have possibly happened to Trevalene. Okay, so let's break down the big 3. First, maybe she just left on her own. There were rumors she was in an unhappy marriage, maybe she'd inherited some money from a lover and decided to start a new life. But the big question is, why would you leave your car, your keys, and your handbag? It just doesn't add up. Second, of course, is the smartly dressed man. Was he involved? Or, and this is an interesting little twist, could it have been a misunderstanding? Maybe it was just her own brother Phil, who was in town visiting. And finally, suspicion fell on her husband, Richard. His alibi had some holes in it, and he was even arrested a decade later. All right, so for 10 years, everyone's focus is on this mystery man, this sketch. Then, a decade into the case, in 2001, the police drop an absolute bombshell. After re-examining the whole thing, they announced that the sketch that had been everywhere was inaccurate, and everyone should just completely ignore it. And get this, on the exact same day that they tell everyone to forget the sketch, they arrest Trevalene's husband, Richard. A new witness suddenly came forward, claiming they saw Richard in a pub at 2:30 p.m. on the day she disappeared, which was the exact time of her last confirmed sighting. Now, he was later released without charge, but the timing is just so suspicious. The same day they discredit the main alternative suspect, they arrest the husband. But that arrest didn't stick, and the case went cold all over again. For nearly 2 decades, there was just nothing. And that is until the Sutton brothers' discovery in 2019 brought the whole thing crashing right back into the headlines, with a new lead that pointed straight back to Trevalene's husband.
So the brothers didn't just pick this golf club out of a hat. They were following a tip. Actually, 2 separate tips from nearly 30 years apart, but they both said the same thing. There was a terrible, awful smell at the club during the summer of 1990, and it was a place that Trevalene's husband, Richard, was known to go to a lot.
So the Sutton brothers, convinced they've found human remains, take their photos straight to the police. The authorities go out, they do a formal search of the area under the floorboards, but their official report? It was a flat denial. It stated that absolutely nothing was found. But the story gets even stranger. 2 years after the police search, this mysterious plaque just appears, bolted to a public bench nearby. And its hand-scratched message? Well, it seems to back up the brothers' claims. It alleges that Trevolene's remains were found at the golf club, but then they were removed on the very day of the official police search. So where does this leave us? I mean, it's an impossible question. Was a 30-year-old murder finally solved, only to be covered up? Or was this whole discovery just a trick of light and shadows? The official case of Trevalene Evans remains open, caught between this really chilling photograph and an official denial, leaving us with absolutely nothing but questions.